Hi, Elwood City Limits listeners. It's Will coming at you on Wednesday, August the 11th. This is probably the most current that the show has ever been because I have a couple of important announcements that I want to share with you, and I want to make sure it gets to you directly. So I figured this is the best way to do it. I won't take up too much of your time. I have two announcements that, we're both going to need your help with, your input with, and your excitement for. The first one, and this is the big one. I'll start it off big. So we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary, as I've mentioned many times. It's August the 19th is when we officially started as a podcast. So we're planning something very special. We are going to be doing our first ever Twitch stream. That's right. We're finally going to be streaming on Twitch, and we've got a whole fun night planned. So the stream is going to be happening. It's going to be happening Saturday, September the 4th. It's going to be starting at 8 o'clock p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. Now, that's 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I never thought I'd actually get to say that. I used to hear that on Fox Kids all the time. So, again, Saturday, September 4th, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, which is the time zone that Lucas and I live in. If you would like to join us, we'd love you to join us. Twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod. That's www.twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod. Follow us over there so you don't miss out. And we are also welcoming your suggestions. What type of videos should we watch during this stream? We've already gotten a few suggestions from our patrons, but we're opening the floor to you, the free feed listeners, as well. So send us a social media message, an email. What should we discuss or watch during our Twitch stream? We've got a bunch of hours in front of us that Saturday night, so please let us know how we should spend it. And it would mean more coming from you, the listener, since this is, we wouldn't get to 5 years without you. One more time, that Twitch stream, Saturday, September 4th, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock Atlantic Standard Time. Twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod. We will see you there. Let us know if you have any questions. Secondly, it's here once again. The Coast's Best of Halifax 2021 nominations are now open. Now, if you're not familiar with this, if you're a new listener, or if you don't remember this, we always like to make a little bit of a play for the Coast's Best of Halifax Awards. The Coast is a local paper that Lucas and I both enjoy, a local publication, and every year they do a Best of Halifax to celebrate, well, the best of our city. And they do indeed have a Best Podcast Award. Now, in recent years, we have been nominated, which has been thanks to you, and we appreciate the nomination, but we go in with the hope that we might win. So the first step is, of course, the nomination process. If you go to vote.thecoast.ca, or if you Google search the Coast Best of Halifax 2021, you can nominate right now. So we are looking for you to nominate Elwood City Limits as the best podcast. Now, this will involve a little bit of registration. I believe you'll have to, insert your email address. I think you might even have to make up a username and password. So if you take the time to do this, my God, we really appreciate it. I know I hate doing those things too, but it would really help us. This is another great way for us to get listeners, and we talk about local content all the time. So I believe that we have a pretty good case for being the best Halifax podcast, and it would just be a nice feather in our cap. So if you feel like doing something nice for us, my goodness, we would really appreciate it. That's vote.thecoast.ca. Nominations are going to be open for a little while in August. According to the website, the final voting ballot will be launching in early September and going into October 3rd, with the results published in November. So you have until about the end of August to nominate us. The more nominations, the better. It means that we have a bit of a stronger case. And then in September, if we do get nominated, we will be looking to you for votes, but we will cross that bridge when and if we come to it. For right now, vote.thecoast.ca to nominate us as best podcast in Halifax. We would really appreciate it. You certainly don't have to if you don't want to, but it would mean a lot to us, and we appreciate it if you already have nominated us. Thank you very much. All the same. Nominate us in the Best of Halifax Awards and be there Saturday, September 4th, 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Atlantic on twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod for our very first ECL stream, our 5-year anniversary stream. And what should we be watching or talking about? Send us an email and send us a social media message. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even Tumblr. We've gotten some good Tumblr messages, and elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. This is indeed a very special day here on Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast. It's time for another edition of ECL Presents, and this is one that I didn't even dare to dream that this could happen. Will Young here, and thankfully for this ECL Presents, Lucas Mancini with me as well. I know sometimes I, due to scheduling, have to fly solo, but I couldn't not have Lucas here for this.
I'm hard to pin down, Will. The open road calls to me, and so I'm in and out. I'm like a mysterious stranger, but you've been able to kind of wrangle me in for this one.
The stars aligned in such a way that it's clear that this was meant to happen, and I'm very pleased that you all can be here with us for this. And if you couldn't tell by the title, this is one of our special guests who has actually worked on Arthur, who has been an important part of Arthur, and we're pleased to have him here today. He was, in fact, the voice of DW from season 7 to 10 on Arthur, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about his time there and everything in between. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ECL, Jason Schwimmer.
Wow, thanks you guys. Audience, you guys have some pretty great hosts on your hands, and I understand why you listen to them. But for those of you who didn't know, they're pretty dry off mic. So, what you see is not what I got, and I'm just so relieved. Moments ago, I was a little worried.
That's the radio training, is that we know when to turn it on. When that red light goes, then it's all game on. We have to be on our radio voice. We have to be engaged. We have to be going, to draw everybody in.
I'm just off mic. We're just simple people from rural Nova Scotia.
I mean, even just before we got started, I mean, you guys were just pelting me with insults about my looks and my skills and generally who I am as a person, and so it's so nice that now we're just being friendly. I was very concerned before we started.
Go ahead, Will.
We call that the Halifax hello.
Exactly. It's our anti-Ontario bias. That's what it is. It's
you guys
sure when the mic's rolling, it's all professional, but off mic, it's like you better not have that. What does the Ontario license plate say? It says like "Be here." It's something like that.
It says "Be here." Why go to Halifax?
Exactly.
So, Jason, we're so pleased to have you today. Despite what Jason himself may have said, we are indeed pleased to have you here today. And I think a lot of people have been very excited to have you in something of the spotlight these days because, of course, not only are you here to talk about your experiences with Arthur, but also to talk about your latest podcasting endeavor, Finding DW, which is something that not only have Lucas and I listened to, but a lot of Elwood City listeners would be familiar with as well. And if you're not familiar with the Finding DW podcast, well, I'd say it's an essential listening if you are an Arthur fan. Jason, what is the Finding DW podcast?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, if that's true, if people are excited about my show and stuff, that really means a lot. And for the record, I was already aware of what you guys were up to with Elwood City Limits, and I was already excited. And as we were chatting about off mic, I was cautiously not quite optimistic. I was worried that you guys were going to be that we were going to butt heads or that you guys would have an opinion because you guys are, in my mind, the official Arthur podcast, and here I am stepping in as this new show.
You thought we were going to big time you? Like just
yeah,
come on, just
I
be
was
like,
worried about it.
There's only room for one Arthur podcast in these parts.
Yeah. Just I'm gonna sock you right in the kisser.
Yeah.
What are you doing? But yeah. So Finding DW is it's sort of a passion project, but it started from, So as people may or may not know, I was the voice of DW for seasons 7 to 10 of Arthur, and then didn't really do much acting after the age of 16. And years ago, I realized that our DW has only been voiced by male voice actors. So I just decided it would be a fun idea to track down those other guys, interview them about the experience, and maybe learn something along the way. So that's what I'm doing with my show, Finding DW.
Yeah, and of course, this was the tightrope to walk here, because I think the toughest thing was to find out where our podcast can intersect without stepping on each other's toes, because on your podcast, you go into a lot of your, like you said, your experience acting on the show, your experiences behind the scenes, and what you've been up to since, and you have some great interviews with people who have worked or continue to work on Arthur. So there was a lot of listening to those episodes. There's as of this recording, there's 3. There's going to be 4 out very soon, where I was like, okay, can't ask him that. Oh, can't ask him that either. Oh, when did you get started acting? Oh, he already said, oh, okay. What was it like recording? Okay. So we're going to do this a little bit differently, because in the past, when we've interviewed people who have been part of Arthur, it is very much like, how did you get started in acting? What did you think of this role? And I think those are important questions to ask, but ones that you are able to go a lot more in depth on with your show. So in this regard, I thought it would be interesting if we take the template of a couple of your episodes that you would have voiced for Arthur between seasons 7 and 10. And these are also 2, I'd say, fairly well-regarded episodes. When we talked about them, I think we both enjoyed them quite a bit on the show. And we're going to kind of use that as a little bit of a format to jump off with some questions for you about hopefully some behind-the-scenes stuff that's a little bit more of the exclusive nature, but also anything that kind of comes up in between, which leads me to my first question here. When I was doing the most preliminary of research, when I found out that the Finding DW podcast, when it started, when you had an article in the Toronto Star, which I became aware of and many people sent to us, and then that got me to find out, okay, a little bit more about Jason Schwimmer. We had looked you up, of course, when we had gotten to your tenure on the show on Elwood City Limits. And I was surprised to find out that when I found your official web presence and your name on it and everything, your Wikipedia page is misspelled. And I kind of wondered how you felt about that.
Oh, it's not fun. Basically, what I've learned over the years is that although when you look at my name and when you hear my name, it doesn't sound that complicated, it is very hard for people. And so the first time I think I was ever credited in the credits of Arthur, my name was misspelled. Oh. And I'm pretty sure that's why that's the case. But I also have 2 birthdays on Wikipedia. So I mean, I'm just an enigma wrapped in a mystery. Far more interesting than I am in real life on the internet. So
for the record, It's 1 M, not 2.
Yes. Yeah. But I am going with the same pronunciation as David Schwimmer. Hopefully going to ride that man's coattails.
And of course, doing a little bit of a glance of, so you mentioned that you kind of left acting behind in a sense when you were a teenager. I wanted to ask this quickly because your podcast is all about finding DW. But over here, I want to find James, because one of your earliest Arthur credit, at least according to Wikipedia, and maybe we're going to play a little bit of Mythbusters here, is not as DW, but is as James, the young rabbit who is DW's friend with the glasses. Is that true? Do you remember doing that role?
No, and that's definitely not true. But that's really funny because that is true for another actor who played DW, I think.
Okay.
Because so to the best of my knowledge, that wasn't me. That was the actor who played DW immediately after me. His name is Robert Naylor, and he was the one who played someone on Arthur. I imagine it must have been James. And then when I aged out of the role, Robert was already sort of in that arena and sort of unofficially auditioned for Arthur for the role of DW after having played James. So I believe that would be for him, but I didn't know that was on my Wikipedia. And don't tell Robert, because I'd love to take credit for his work.
I'm just going to delete all these questions about being James. Okay. Yeah. And hey, Listeners, if you decide to edit that Wikipedia page, first of all, one M in Schwimmer. Second of all, please link to Elwood City Limits when you put the addendum that Jason Schwimmer was never James. But I also wanted to know, and I think you spoke a little bit about this when you have done research for your own show, and the 2 episodes that we're going to be talking around this time are DW's Time Trouble and Operation DW, and we all kind of watched it ourselves. What is it like for you to watch Arthur now? Because everybody knows what it's like for us to watch Arthur. It's something we do every week. But as somebody who has both been involved in it and is pretty close to, is like the same age range as us, like, what was that experience like going back to it, such as it is?
It's weird because I loved the show like most people our age, and people continue to love the show. But as soon as I got cast on the show, I sort of stopped watching. And so I was 10 when I got cast, and I basically didn't watch from then on. So I'm not super familiar with the episodes, or my relationship with episodes of Arthur changed because it was no longer episodes that I saw, it was episodes that I was in. So I didn't know the episodes as episodes, I knew them as the scripts I was receiving, or what lines I had. And my favorite episodes would be episodes where there was lots of DW in them, because it meant that I got to do more and have lots of fun, acting as DW. Going back and watching these episodes, it's also very strange because there's some episodes I remember and others that I don't. And so Operation DW was one that I was like, I have no memory of this. Okay. And as the episode goes on, it's like, oh yeah, I do sort of remember this line, or I remember kind of doing that. And it's little things. It's like, I'll hear myself laugh or DW laugh, and I remember being given the direction for, like, this is why you're laughing, or this is how you should deliver that line. But it's not. But it's like it just comes up in the moment. It's not stuff I actively remember.
Right.
So I'm glad that you brought up kind of getting the direction, because that was one of the things that I really wanted to ask you about, is watching these 2 episodes, and they're very DW-centric episodes. There was all these moments where we know a lot less about the production of Arthur than you do, just because you were there for it in a certain respect. And I try to put myself in the booth. Like, I'm like, what was actually going on in terms of, you were a little kid at the time.
Yeah.
And I assume voice directing a little kid is quite different than directing an adult. Because you kind of have to, it's just the way you would communicate differently with a kid than you would communicate to an adult, to try and convey what you want out of them. And there's a moment in DW's Time Troubles where DW has, for those who haven't seen the episode, DW has now, in an imagination sequence, essentially, it's like a dream she's having, gone back in time and tried to change history so that she was, for lack of a better term, born before Arthur. She goes to the baby store and she convinces the parents to buy her instead of Arthur. And in that part, DW there's a part where she's pretending to be an adult, and this is something that's always interested me about voice acting, is when an actor is doing a character voice, but then they're doing a character voice pretending to be another character.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this Russian nesting doll of performance where it seems very complicated. So for something like that, where they're trying to say, okay, you're DW here, but you're DW pretending to be a grown-up, how would a director kind of get that kind of performance out of you, especially you being a little kid at the time?
Well, I have to imagine that it's different for every relationship between a director and a voice actor, because I think everyone's a little bit different in terms of their personality and the relationship to being an actor, being a director, or, the adult relating to a kid dynamic, or vice versa. One of the reasons why I got into voice acting was because my mom heard an open casting call and thought to herself, well, my son is not shy and pretty articulate for a kid. And like, those were the criteria. She thought I would find it fun because of my specific, for lack of a better word that comes to mind, but just skill set, who I was as a person. So from my perspective, I think it was our relationship, myself and the casting and voice director on Arthur, Deborah Toffin, was such that she could speak to me pretty candidly about how she wanted me to deliver certain lines. And so our relationship was very dynamic, and a lot of my performance I would credit to her. Because there were some times where, I think just because I was a kid or whatever, I didn't understand, what was going on in the scene or what was needed. I mean, like you're mentioning, it's DW pretending to do something else. And there were moments where I remember being like, I got this because I enjoy acting and performance. But there were other times where it's like, I don't quite understand the subtlety of performing, the differences between performing DW as a 4-year-old and performing DW as like an 8 or 16-year-old, like in this episode, right? So I don't remember it more than that, other than Deborah Toffin sort of helping me and guiding me, whether it was line by line or scene by scene. But I definitely think it's funny when I hear words that are beyond my vocabulary at the time, or DWs, like when she mentions that Arthur, they should take Arthur because for the tax credit or something from the baby store in the scene.
Because he's a broken baby, yeah.
Yeah.
You did mention in one of the episodes that when people ask you to do the DW voice as like a man in his late 20s, and it's just like you just can't get there anymore. So I did find it interesting that you look at it from the other way of like when you were recording DW. Of course, because your voice is so high, even when DW's like, they placed a phone order, it doesn't sound like you at age 20, whatever. It's just like your little self trying to best approximate an adult voice. So that's interesting. That's interesting. I know that it's a part of your life that you kind of remember in bits and pieces, as is a lot of us when we are that age. So I find it interesting that you had that relationship with Deborah Toffin was her name. And so that was really something that helped you to get those performances, because I had a bunch of questions here about like what sort of acting techniques did you use as a child and all that kind of stuff. But maybe and again that's kind of us as outsiders to the industry.
Well, on that note, so DW, and this is again one of the reasons that has made the character popular to this day, is that DW is very much a one-liner kind of character, where she always has, and this is why kind of the Arthur memes have continued to feature DW. If you look on YouTube and you type in DW savage moments, there's all these from all different seasons, your seasons, other seasons, of DW having these one-liners. And luckily, in these 2 episodes we watched today, there's a couple examples of this. I think at the end of Operation DW, DW's looking in Arthur's ears, and she goes, "Your ears look fine," and then there's a beat. And then she goes, "But your brain is missing."
Yeah.
And this is her, opportunity to be like, "Oh, Arthur's dumb." But I wonder for like jokes like that where they're so timing based. As a kid, I think kids don't have a great sense of comedic timing. They just kind of say, and watch, I have it right now. I'm doing word vomit, but they just have word vomit where they never pause or let the joke breathe. And so for a line like that, is that getting kind of artificially created in post-processing, where they're like, well, we have the audio of you saying your ears look fine and the audio of you saying, but your brain is missing, so let's just create a little bit more space here? Or do you remember actually getting direction of like, oh, pause for a second and then deliver the line so it hits more?
I think it's probably more of the latter. Definitely, it wasn't even that like because I'm not a formally trained voice actor, and I wasn't then. So I think that anything that I've learned, I learned probably directly from Deborah in terms of like delivery and yeah, like comedic timing and stuff like that. I mean, I'm grateful that I'm, again, just like when it comes to performing and even podcasting, I just sort of rely on kind of like instinct or like my gut, and I think that sort of served me well, and I can't imagine it was much different when I was a kid.
Did you find watching either of these episodes, again, it's DW's Time Travel and Operation DW, which are also Elwood City Limits episodes if you want the full blow-by-blow commentary, did you find that there were any moments in these episodes where you did that made you laugh or anything like that? Because I think that something that can happen sometimes is that when you revisit these, and we talk about this throughout the show a lot, is that sometimes you're just like, oh yeah, this is good for like the age range they're going for, and that can be true with a lot of the writing, a lot of the humor, a lot of the setups. Was there anything that you felt was like, oh no, this is just funny, or this just works?
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite parts of doing my show and watching the episodes that you guys wanted to chat about today, one of my favorite parts has been watching episodes of Arthur and just falling in love with, again, just how fun and ridiculous the writing can be at times. Even just like what comes right to mind is the when DW breaks the fourth wall, talks directly to the audience at the beginning of DW's Time Trouble, and says, I know Arthur's always telling you that having a little sister is a pain, but look at what I have to deal with, and this is only the tail of the iceberg. Is just such a silly, because she messes up tip of the iceberg. She says tail. I love stuff like that. I love wordplay, so that stuff's really great. But then I also just the ridiculous cutaways and how imaginative and silly they can be are so fun and definitely play to my sensibilities, because I think that as much as I like mature comedy made for adults my age or whatever, I'm very much a fan of like goofy, silly stuff too. So Arthur's really wonderful for that.
And DW's Time Troubles is like one of the more high concept Arthur episodes there are. Like, we have time travel, we have paradoxes, teenage DW meeting younger DW, which is the creation of one of an infamous Arthur meme of sort of them looking at each other. And so you get some of that stuff where like there's imagination sequences throughout both of these episodes, and they kind of play on how elevated the Arthur writing can be, despite it being a show intended for people in elementary school. Because there's a subtlety, like, so for instance, when we're looking in DW's imagination, the characters all change because they're not the characters how they exist in the rest of the show. They're the characters as if they exist in DW's perspective. So instead of Arthur acting like Arthur, Arthur's acting like this kind of dim-witted approximation of Arthur. And like, instead of their parents acting like how DW's parents normally act, they're acting like these like really like, oh, anything for you, DW, we love you so much. You're like, you're so wonderful. And there's a subtlety to that writing that I think your average kid might not even pick up on, but it makes it entertaining to watch even as an adult.
Yeah, I love the way that DW sees herself. It's super funny, and I think we need more people like that. The more that I work on my show, and the more I talk to, talking to in my upcoming episode, I talked to the writer Peter Hirsch, and he says it more eloquently than I'm saying it now. But I think that DW is a really good role model in that sense, because she's very outspoken and confident and self-assured, and I think we need more people like that. I think we need more everyone should be more like DW.
One thing, we kind of put the call out for questions from our listeners, and I don't know if there's a super great time to ask this, so I'll just kind of it's a bit random. It's from Peebs, and they wanted to know. So again, this is kind of playing perhaps a bit of MythBusters here with your as we've already established, spotty Wikipedia page that so that you did some voiceover for the Arthur spinoff Postcards from Buster, and if voiceover in a technical sense, was it any different from the process of voiceover recording for Arthur? And I think their question was more like, would you record the Postcards from Buster in the same batch as like a batch of episodes of Arthur, or would that be done at a different time or even different location, if you can remember?
I think it No, but I definitely knew that it was for Postcards from Buster when I went in.
Okay.
You sort of knew going in what episodes you were doing, and then maybe there would sometimes be, okay, we like, since you're here, let's do some pickups on like which is like, okay, some of the episodes, for whatever reason, this line and that line that you recorded a week ago or yesterday or whatever, we need to redo them for some reasons.
Right.
But usually when I went in, it was to do specific episodes, so I knew I was doing Postcards from Buster versus Arthur.
So the kind of shifting a little bit over to Operation DW, which is another one we really enjoyed. And as I kind of mentioned before, this was one that I think we both enjoyed because for the age range that it was meant to speak to, it did such a good job, at least I remember feeling this way personally, that it did such a good job of kind of putting visits to the doctor as like not something to be afraid of. So, and I remember, I feel like we talked about this at the time of like, we wondered if this kind of, if this really inspired any little kid to have less fear of the doctor or anything like that. And which makes me want to ask, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and you spoke about this in your podcast about how sometimes people will, when it comes up in conversation, and people will be like, "Oh my God, you played DW on Arthur," and it's like obviously can't do the voice anymore, and your memories of being on the show only go so far. But I wonder, when you were doing the show, or even up to now, have you had any interactions with fans that have been like especially meaningful? I suppose we talked a little bit about this when we were recording for your show, and how we've had interactions with listeners that have been especially meaningful that we still think about. And I wonder if that goes the other way, if anybody has ever, come up to you and imparted something meaningful that DW has done for them, which you would have been a part of, or anything of that nature.
So that stuff's only really come up now, I would say, as I've been more open about having played DW and have been pretty public about what I'm doing with my show, for example. Now I've sort of gotten people reaching out and saying nice things and all that. But I think because it's top of mind and because I'm not, because up until now, I've been, trying to craft an identity for myself that doesn't involve DW. I want people to be just as excited, if not more so, about who I am as an adult, not just that I was DW when I was 10. And so now that it's all front of mind or top of mind, and now that I'm so, I'm trying to really explore how DW fits into my identity. I feel like maybe I'm revisiting those moments in my past too, where people have said, "Oh, DW was an important character for me," and I always think it's really cool when it's like a female person or a female identifying person who tells me that DW inspired them in such and such way, because I think that's so cool. Like I'm so now, especially, like I'm just so proud that I played a part in, helping these people find themselves, or, just entertaining people. Because my relationship with like watching shows and stuff, like everyone who, gets really into TV shows and movies and stuff like that, like, we love the actors who play the characters that we love, but like, I don't really identify with, if people love DW, I'm such a small piece of the puzzle, or I see myself that way. I really credit, like, any line you love is not, like, I didn't come up with the line, like it's I didn't even come up with the character. So I'm just proud to have played a small part in what made so many people like happy or excited. And whenever I read a message like that, I'm just so grateful that they, find me interesting enough to even care about what I'm up to,
I think that we share that a little bit. And I think it's when you put yourself publicly out there in the way that either you did as a voice actor or as an actor in general, and then there's us who kind of put at least our voices out there and our kind of personas, you can never really account for the ways in which people will react to you. And you speak about that very well, and you continue to do so on your podcast. So yeah, I'm very glad, and I would certainly hope that, especially for any of our listeners who haven't listened to your podcast yet and are just kind of getting to know your story, like this is their launching point, I would hope that they would be able, or at least feel comfortable enough, that if DW or your time on the show was important to them in a way, that they would be able to reach out to you without it feeling, too weird or anything like that.
No, I mean, I'm always very receptive to that stuff. It's especially cool when it's like, like I always like to sort of like I don't know, like if that person is who reaches out to me is also public about what they're up to, like something that comes to mind is someone reached out to me who's working at NPR and talked about how DW is, played an important part. She's such a big fan of DW and and that stuff. And I was like, it's just so crazy that somebody that I would just unrelated to DW, someone that I think is so cool and like so ambitious and like awesome, someone I would like, I don't know, be like, how do I become like that person? Or I would want to be like that person. And the fact that I did something that inspired them in any way is such a strange and fun, cool thing. And the fact, so it's moments like that too, where I'm just like, it's so like, I'm still unpacking like what, like how can I react in any way other than to be like, this is just so weird and cool. I don't know.
When we talked about Operation DW, we actually ended up learning a little bit because there's like that kind of more scientific section about how it is that earwax works and like the buildup of, as the doctor says, gunk in DW's ear, and they do that kind of fun go through. Was there anything that, and this is a little bit only tangentially related to that, was there anything that you learned from your time on Arthur that you still kind of keep with you? And you can relate that to either within the field of like learning something in terms of acting or in terms of the industry, or by doing these kinds of educational things, did you learn anything like practical information from like the scripts you would get or anything like that?
Have anything that you have said as DW become internalized?
Yes.
And now you've actually learned the same lesson DW has?
I mean, definitely not consciously, but that did actually stand out to me. It felt very like Magic School Busy. That one sequence where DW is like traveling through her, she's like surfing on a sound wave and like going through her own eardrum, or she bounces off the eardrum and into the gunk. Like I thought that sequence was really cool, but and fun to watch. But no, nothing like, I don't think I really consciously learned anything like that in like, practical or scientific or, but I mean, like in terms of, I learned a lot of like smaller things that I do still think about, like my accent, for example. I was very conscious of having a Canadian accent, and I still am. And it's because of my time on Arthur, because I, certain words that I would say, well, no, you have to say it like an American person would say it.
So for those who may not be familiar, can you give an example of what a Canadian accent sounds like? Because Lucas and I, we're a bit we're in too deep with that. Like I don't know, like we are, like if we have a Canadian accent, it's hard for us to tell. It's like,
we have like an East Coast accent. It's so funny because like when I talk to people from Vancouver, they think I sound ridiculous. they like it's so funny that like I know what you're saying in terms of like you can't even tell that me and you have a Canadian accent. Not only do we have a deeply Canadian accent, like we sound weird to people even in Canada, let alone people in the States would think we sound super.
For sure.
Well, what stuff do you guys get? Like, does your audience sort of point that stuff out?
I don't think a lot of the questions we get are kind of more based around our region.
Cultural.
Yeah, cultural.
Yeah, like for instance, there's an episode of Arthur where there's a bag of milk.
Oh yeah.
And the Americans have like that was one of our most kind of emailed about topics because people couldn't believe it. They were like, "What?" It was really confusing to a lot of people. And then there was Canadians who were saying, actually that's kind of even a regional thing within Canada. I never had a bag of milk. So there was a couple weeks on the show where there was just bag of milk discourse. And I think even the way I'm saying milk right now could be considered a Canadian accent. I really don't know.
Just be curious if there's anything you can particularly remember that had to kind of be flattened down, and no offense to American listeners, but like shaped into an American pronunciation as opposed to your more naturalistic Canadian pronunciation.
Well, I'm lucky in the sense that it's a lot of similarities to the difference between being from Montreal in Quebec versus being where I am now in Toronto, being in Ontario, because a lot of those the accents, the differences between those two accents are similar to the differences between the Canadian and the American accent. And there's small things, but it can be just the way that we pronounce the letter A in words. For example, I grew up going to summer camp, but in Ontario, it's I grew up going to summer camp, and they say it like that in the States too. Now I sort of lean more naturally towards the Ontario way of saying things, but I'm very conscious of, because I worked for an American podcast for a bit, and saying words like out, about, words with that sound in them, that's very Canadian, and I'm conscious of it, but I can't, at a certain point I have to stop self-editing myself. I mean, I'm just a guy. I'm from Canada. I've got to sound like I'm Canadian at a certain point.
You are who you are, exactly.
Exactly.
It's one of the reasons why the older I get, I find myself listening to more and more kind of Canadian media, listening to more CBC music too, because I like to hear people that sound like people around here. Like, especially here in Nova Scotia, we have such a wide variety of accents. Someone from Cape Breton does not sound like from someone from Yarmouth, and they do not sound like someone from Halifax, and they do not sound like someone from New Brunswick. And so I like seeing that kind of diversity reflected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the East Coast, and two of my very closest friends are from the East Coast, one from PEI and one from New Brunswick. And it's just I love that accent. It's such a wonder. It's so much fun. I love when they like imitate their grandparents or their older relatives. It's great. I also a friend of mine, I had a friend who's from Castlegar or something like that, or I had another friend who's from, I don't know, just like the deeper and deeper you go into Canada, I find it so charming and awesome. Like the good parts of Canada, or like, I don't know, the more wholesome parts of Canada. I think it's wonderful, and I love the like the vibe. I've only been to Halifax once, but I love the vibe out there, and yeah. Anyway, there's no point to that. I love finding out that, like, I love like you're saying. I think here's the point, Lucas. Like, I love finding not just like radio or podcast content, but I love like when I find out a band I really like happens to be Canadian. I was just talking last night with someone, and we were talking about like I was talking about bands I like and that they happened to be Canadian, like Tokyo Police Club or like Moneen or Death from Above or Alexis on Fire, and like all these bands that I would
legendary Alexis on Fire. Yeah,
like just bands I liked anyway, and they happen to be Canadian too. It just makes me even more of a fan of theirs. Like I love I mean, it's like it's such a silly thing to say, but I love that I'm Canadian, you know? Like, being Canadian's awesome.
So what I wanted to add, and I think that actually goes really well into what I wanted to ask you as we move into kind of more modern day type of stuff, you know, beyond the DW of it all, you are in fact your own person. And I wanted, I dubbed thee your own person. And I wanted to know kind of what inspires you today. So we're talking about Arthur as something that you can still go back to and watch. But what are, and you can relate this however you want. It could be music, television, movies, podcasts, especially perhaps. But the things that are really inspiring you creatively as you go forward into this relatively new endeavor.
So it's funny because the thing that I am definitely most inspired by is also something I think I have a complicated relationship with, and it's I have a tendency to like idolize creators or media personalities or actors whose careers I really want to emulate, because in my mind they're doing what I want to do, and that I feel like that person for me always kind of fluctuates a little bit. A good example of that is like Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, who in my mind is like, you know, the fact that he's like a multi-hyphenate. He does all these things, and he, you know, can get paid to be a musician, but he's also, you know, TV writer. He's also a comedian. Like, he does all these things, and that's the kind of person I want to be. Like, in my mind, like, if you are talented enough to be, if you're talented and creative, you know, that's like, in a way, like, I look at that and I'm like, well, that's freedom. Like, that's the freedom to do whatever you want to do, and, you know, support causes you want to support, and put whatever kind of art you want out into the world. Like, that's the kind of person I want to be. So I'm inspired by just trying to prove myself as someone worthy of being able to wake up every day and do exactly what I want to do. And I think that finding DW is like my best chance at doing that, because as I think I mentioned, I don't like, I'm sort of losing track of when I mentioned this to you guys, but like I have big dreams that are not humble. Like I want to, like in my mind, like it would be so awesome to be like super successful in show business, because I just think like when I picture myself being the best version of myself, or how can I be not only like satisfied to myself that I did everything I could do, but also how could I be the best, how could I give myself or the most of myself and be of service to the world too? Like I can't think of anything other than like want to host it like a talk show, like want to be a big director, like want to write and direct my own movie, like just how can I, and the question I struggle with is like, well, don't idolize these people doing those things, because then you're just going to be a second tier that person. Like I also have to be my own person. And so it's tough because, it's like, I'm sure you guys can relate to this. Like, there's no like, sometimes I'll put out a podcast, or sometimes I like start writing something and I'm like, am I doing this right? Like, like what if I'm putting it out and this isn't the right timing, or this isn't how that person that I idolize would have done it, and I start to question myself. But I think that the more you do that, the more you hold yourself back from just being honest and open and stuff. So it's what inspires me is just trying to be the best version of myself, and not trying too hard to just try to be like the people who I respect in a space that I'm trying to work in as well. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Okay.
I really think it does. And this podcast that you've started, as we kind of as we start to wrap up here, of course, I want you to talk to the people who may not have listened to Finding DW yet. I would love for you to talk about why they should listen, because I think it's self-evident. At least if I may, for as soon as I started listening to the podcast, I was like, oh no, this is something special. And I feel that our listeners who love Arthur and who are interested in the people who make the thing that they love will really get a kick out of this. And to boot, it is an incredibly slick final product, and I don't say that about a lot of. I'm very critical of the way that podcasts sound, and I think that yours is. It's superior in terms of a lot of production and a lot of content. So I really want to make sure that you let everybody know why it is that they should be listening to Finding DW, and anything else that you want to promote in terms of your own presence where people can find you, because I'm sure that there are some among our listenership who would like to reach out to you if possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, to start, first of all, thank you. I mean, like, I definitely putting everything I have into this thing, and, whether or not the episodes are received well, like, I'm very happy with what I've put out so far and what I've continued to make. So it's really nice that's appreciated. Like, it means so much more than I can articulate. So thank you, first of all. Yeah, why should people listen? I mean, like, I try to be just as honest as possible about it, and I think like the pitch for it is, if you're interested in the pitch, you'll like the show. And it's just that, look, I was DW on Arthur, and so I think that makes me the right person to interview the other people who played DW on Arthur. And I think the conversations that we've had have all been super fun and interesting. And if you like TV shows and learning like behind the scenes stuff, you'll like my show. If you liked Arthur and you want to learn some more stuff about that and maybe about DW as a character, you'd like my show. But I also try to, it's important to me that my show is also as honest and autobiographical as possible. So it's also like a coming of age story about, me trying to move on and in a healthy way and understand more about how having played DW fits into my life. So, usually when somebody asks me about, what is the podcast that you're working on, or I don't usually go into all that stuff, because I try to just get people excited about the more simple hook of it all, which is having that I was DW and I'm on a mission to find those other DWs. But like, there is more to that. But I always try to invite people in and enjoy and find parts of it that they themselves like. And I hope that that's as enticing enough as I can make it, because that's just the honest truth is I'm having fun making it, and I think people should listen. I think people would like it, because I know that if I wasn't making my podcast, like, I would think it was really good. So I know that if I'm a fan of what I'm making, that's probably a good sign. And then where people can find me, I mean, I am trying to get people to follow and subscribe and listen to Finding DW wherever that you normally listen to podcasts. It's on all the platforms. Please come follow me on Instagram, which is just Jason Schwimmer, which is my name, and that's where you can see behind the scenes stuff and sort of more about me and kind of my process, because I recently started my social media, so it really is for now just my process as a creator. And hopefully as I graduate from this project and hopefully as my career in the space grows, you can follow along with me and see my journey there. And if you're in a position to do so, and if you're interested in what I'm doing, I please feel free to check out my Patreon for bonus content and to help support me on my mission, because I'm having a blast doing this, and the more people that come on board that way means the more time I can just spend doing this stuff, and it's what I love, and yeah, that would mean a lot too. So that's my pitch.
Okay. And of course, if it wasn't obvious before, it gets a hearty ECL recommendation from both Lucas and I, who have listened to the show. And I mean, not only would we want to have you on here because you are you, but we also are big fans of what you're currently putting out. And I think that it should have more people listening to it. So Jason, we're super pleased to have had you here. Lucas, is there anything that you didn't get to that you wanted to?
Nope. Just want to thank Jason for coming on, and I look forward to Finding DW. I guess episode 4. Not sure when this comes out, but whatever the next one is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and just in case, once more, thank you guys so much for giving me this platform and for doing what you do. I mean, I really like your podcast too, and I'm so jealous of the vibe you guys have, and when I think of the podcasts that I love, it's a good combination of podcasts that are similar to mine in terms of being more produced, and yours, which is the more host centric and based on you guys hanging out and taking us along with you on your journey and letting us know about your lives and such. But I really like what you guys are doing, and I'm so glad we were able to connect and do this.
I didn't think it would get more surreal than Bruce Dinsmore singing "My Nightlight" on the show, but to hear DW say that they're a fan of our show is like, if I could go back to 10-year-old Will and be like, "Don't worry, in 20 years, something's gonna happen that you're not gonna believe."
I still feel that way. I'm behind, but I'm really into The Mandalorian season 2, and I was a production assistant on Kim's Convenience, and then I'm just minding my own business, and here comes Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, who plays Mr. Kim, is in one of the X-wing ships, and I was just like, what is happening? I know that guy. That's Paul. That's crazy.
You're one step closer to Star Wars.
Oh man, it's the coolest. He is such a fan of Star Wars, naturally as a person. And it's that's a dream come true moment for him. So I'm just proud for him. I'm so excited. It's so wild. Anyways,
so that's going to do it for this edition of ECL Presents. Now, what we normally do with an ECL episode is that Lucas has something of the final say with a quote, but I wanted to, Jason, from your most recent viewing of these episodes, is there an Arthur quote that you would end an episode of ECL with if you had the opportunity?
Oh boy. I mean, I feel like I'm doing a bad job as a guest, but I'm not sure. Do you guys have something?
It's quite all right. It's very on the spot. So.
Oh, I got one written down. Can we get from the? I know you can't do the voice anymore, but from the voice of DW themselves.
Yeah.
Can we get a "You're not that broken baby" from the baby store?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it in my best attempt at the DW voice.
Oh, bless.
Here we go. You're not that broken baby from the baby store.
Oh my God! I heard it. I heard.
You can sort of hear it, right?
Oh my
Yeah,
god!
it's kind of
wow.
there. It's kind of there. I still hear it. Like when I talk,
Yeah.
I'm like, I hear myself as that. Like I know that's like you hear this person, and it's like, what do you even mean? But to me, I still sound like that.
Yeah, and I was like, you know, we're well past the point of puberty. It's just like I don't know if it's gonna happen, but there was that little bit there, and then nobody out there cannot say that we didn't indeed have the voice of DW here on Elwood City Limits. So for our wonderful and esteemed guest, Jason Schwimmer, really, I wish you nothing but the best in this continued podcast and in chasing your dreams in general. I think that we would all like to see you succeed in that front. I'm Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini, that's ECL Presents, and we will see you next time.
Woo! I'm so when you started saying the wrap up thing, I was like, oh no, like let's just keep it going.